This podcast could potentially have adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly the possibility of sexual content. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I am your host, Erica Lance. Do not forget to like and subscribe. And of course, if you ever want to reach out to us, drinkingwithauthors@gmail.com. My amazing co-host today is Bo Lake. And we have a very, very, very special episode because we were contacted earlier this year about an author named Annie O'Neill Stein, who has written a book called Exit Wounds. She has a fabulous life that we're going to get into, but unfortunately she passed away. So we have her amazing husband here to help us tell her story about this book that she wrote. So Jeffrey Stein, welcome to Drinking with Authors.
Thanks, Erica. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, we talk a little bit about what we're drinking so people can drink along. And so a little bit in homage to where her book takes place, I am drinking a hot toddy. So it is lemon. It's actually a whole lemongrass, cinnamon tea, and honey with whiskey in it. And it may be early in the afternoon, but it is 54 degrees here. So I figured this was appropriate. But what are you drinking?
It's super cold out, so that's like the perfect drink.
It is.
I have a blue moon today. That is what I'm drinking today.
I do enjoy a blue moon with a good orange.
It's my favorite, yeah.
Yes. And
What
Jeffrey,
is Blue Moon? What is Blue Moon?
It's a beer. It's a pale ale.
Geez, I feel like such a wuss now. You know, you have a little whiskey, you have a little beer. I just got a bottle of water, I tell you.
That's okay. You may be the healthier one of all of us. I mean,
It's true.
I don't know. I think I should go and get some tequila. I think I should infuse it with a little tequila to really kind of perk it up for me.
I do like that.
I'm here in Los Angeles. I'm here in Los Angeles where it is mild, the weather's warm, and it is still before noon. So please excuse me for being out.
No, that's okay. You know, it's 2:00 and I'm drinking a hot toddy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I just use the excuse of being a podcast host to do this, but really, I don't know. So Jeffrey, can you talk a little bit about your wife and what she chose to write a book?
Yes, it's interesting because originally this book started out as a series of short stories, and it was some time ago. She was accepted at the Writers' Conference at Sewanee in Tennessee, the Writers' Conference, and there Alice McDermott, who is a award-winning, highly esteemed author, was her teacher there and mentored her. And she suggested to Annie that she take these short stories and actually turn it into a novel. She thought it should be a novel. So the first part of the book, I mean, it is a novel, but the first part of the book, I would say, is closer to memoir from the point of view that a lot of the stories that, set the stage for Laura, the lead character's journey, took place in Annie's childhood, and I think that she needed to kind of put some light into the darkness in order to kind of, in a way, save herself. She grew up in an Irish Catholic family. There was alcoholism, there was abuse. It was not directed towards Annie herself, but from the father to the mother. And it was there was a lot of darkness there mixed in with Sunday morning pancakes. So it wasn't like all just horror, but there was a lot of a darkness there. And I think Annie just needed to shine a light as a way of liberating it from herself. And
that's very cool. So when did she start this?
Oh my gosh, she's been writing this book almost as long as I know her. she started these short stories, I'd say as long as 12, 15 years ago. She, when she worked with Alice McDermott, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I guess it was about 8 years ago. So she's been writing this, and she turned it into a novel. And the second part of the book is more fiction than the first part, but it's still is an expression of her personal journey through the main character, Laura. And listen, I think all artists are informed by their own experience. So even though it's fiction, you draw from what you kind of know. And so I think a lot of it, even though the second half is more fiction, is drawn from Annie's own process.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And it's very true. Like, that is what happens. You do draw on a lot of your life experience now, whether you do that to modify it or you use it to channel some part of story or acting. So Annie was an actress too.
She was an actress. I mean, listen, I look at Annie's life truthfully, and especially since she passed away, it was interesting because we had a memorial for Annie. And in organizing the memorial, I wound up going through tons and tons of photos and life experiences that we had, reliving a lot of stuff. So I knew how to present, what I saw as Annie, as her life. And what I really came to the conclusion was that her life was really a life of triumph. Especially when one reads this book and you see what the early parts of her life were like and where she came from, and the fact that she was essentially orphaned as a young teenager. Her mother, who she was very close to, died a couple of weeks before Annie turned 13. And her father died a few years after that. So she was essentially an orphan. And her childhood was a combination of Park Avenue privilege, because her mother's family came what they call the lace curtain Irish. And her father's family was kind of off the boat, more what they call the shanty Irish. So there was this kind of always conflict. They lived in a big house, but the furniture was shabby type of thing. And she had to find a way through life to get the kind of life she wanted. And so in a sense, it's this journey, her journey, Annie's personal journey. Yes, she became an actress. And she was a working actress. She was never obviously a big star, otherwise you would have known her that way. But she had, parts in, Charlie's Angels and Miami Vice, and plus some small parts in feature films. But she morphed from that into becoming a stylist.
Wow.
And she worked with, Annie had an amazing sense of style. I mean, everybody always talks about how she dressed. And she worked with a lot of the top directors doing commercials and print work for a bunch of years. And then I guess after she had the children and it was more important for her to stay home, she then kind of morphed into becoming a writer. And she started out writing for magazines and newspapers. She was published in the New York Times, the LA Times, and a lot of magazines. She was a regular contributor to the Huffington Post. And then she started writing these stories from childhood. And that's when these stories eventually, and they were very powerful.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose him?
I think we might have lost him.
We may have lost him.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there he is. There, you're back. You froze for a moment. That's okay. We were having a moment like.
Were you able to hear what I said?
Up until
Part of it.
the very last couple of seconds, yes.
Oh my God.
That's okay.
All that brilliance.
All that brilliance, it's frozen. I do want to say something to something you said earlier. Woo, whiskey. One of the things I thought that you said, which was really important about her life for people listening out there, is I talk about it. I did acting when I was younger. I did a lot of play work and I did some commercial work and a couple of movies before I had children, because apparently they don't want you to bring little babies to the set. Whatever, that's fine. You have to be A-list for that. But people I think, underestimate how many working actors there are. You see them in different TV shows, in commercials, in different movies, and they're not necessarily the big name, but they're working all the time.
Right.
And that is probably the majority of actors out there are working actors, that if that's what you want to do, you have to do that. And I think that's true in a lot of our industries. There's working authors that are not necessarily the Stephen Kings or the Stephanie
Right.
Meyers or the, Nora Roberts. I can
Right.
list a bunch of them. Those are the 1%ers, right? And then the rest of us are writing and writing and writing, or doing whatever the activity is all the time. And there's a lot to be said for that, because there's a perseverance in working actors, that it's not that they just walk onto a stage and they get everything, or people call them going, I want you to do this. That does happen. But a lot of times it's auditions, 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 and a ton of work, and waiting to hear how that's going to go.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's, listen, I was in the movie business. That's what brought me out here. So I know that world somewhat. What you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, sometimes I'll look at a movie, like an old movie from the 40s, for example, and you see the headliners, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, John Huston, or whatever. And then you see a list of about another 10 names underneath it, which are featured players, which nobody's ever heard of. And I think to myself, those actors probably get a plum part in a Humphrey Bogart movie. They must have thought, I'm making it. But yet, there are so many of those people, they kind of, like you say, they are working, but they never bubble to the top where people would know who they are. And that's quite common. I have a friend out here, she works all the time and nobody would know her name. She's always,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think there's something to be said, and in a degree of respect that should be paid to that, because it is a lot of the background characters or the episodic characters or something like that. Like, the characters during the show make a difference, but the ones that come in and play the bad guy on the show, or the comic relief, or the weird girlfriend or boyfriend or partner,
the ones you have to look up on IMDb afterward, because you're like, I know that face, but I don't know their name, sort of character.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that is an important, anyway, you said that, and I like to highlight those things when they come up. So, so she started writing these as short stories. Did she ever go, hey, I'm going to publish these, or that's my goal and I want to publish them?
So I'm not clear what her goal was. She originally wanted to publish a book of short stories. That was her goal. And I guess she was gathering these. There were probably a half a dozen stories, which I have read over the years, that are in the book, basically the first part of the book. And she was going to do a book of short stories. But it was Alice told her, this should really be a novel. So she went back, and it took her a long time to convert it into a novel. And she went through so many drafts. I can't begin to tell you how many times it was written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten, until she finally got it really right. I mean, the reviews, there have been some reviews of the book. The early reviews have been out and out raves, 5-star raves from everybody. One person called it they said, I'm just going to read this. This heartbreaking and gritty novel is sure to become a modern classic. And what breaks my heart a little bit is that Annie's not here to hear those comments from people, because, listen, every artist, I think, always gets a little insecure about their output before they put it out there, and hope people, and that's even with big stars and all, big, well-established people. So she was kind of concerned, how would it be accepted? Will people accept it? So it kind of breaks my heart. I read these reviews, my heart soars, but my stomach drops. It's so kind of bittersweet. Anyway.
No, totally. I think that's sweet. I think, though, she put this beautiful piece of art out there that's going to keep her memory alive, because it's going to impact all the people that are a part of it. And that is a neat thing when you create art. It's probably still true of some of the acting she's done and the commercials. There are people that saw commercials she did, and that's the commercial that's in their memory all the time. Like, I think we could all pick a commercial that we remember that's in our memory that maybe didn't have all the stars or whatever. Like, I know it's funny, this just popped into my mind, but like Time to Make the Donuts. I don't know if people remember that set of commercials, right? But that was a dude that was the Time to Make the Donuts dude. Like, that was his whole thing, right? But I remember that. I think commercials, I think probably the parts she did, all of this, the cool thing is that she's going to continue to affect people's lives. And I'm sure that's part of what drove her passion on some of these things. You know, we generally don't write a book to go, I really hope it pisses everybody off. I mean, there's some authors that do that, but I mean, in general, you write a book to go, I want people to enjoy this to spark joy or spark thought, or, you know, have them relate or be able to see themselves in the book and stuff like that. And although her journey holistically is not unique necessarily, coming from a abusive background and things like that, it's a way that people connect with themselves in the story that's going to be pretty epic. So I'm sure wherever she is, she's smiling about that.
You know, on that point, one of the reviewers actually made a point of saying that she shared her Irish background, and so much of what was in the book, this reviewer related to personally, and it made her, you know, have the smells and the visuals of her life as when she was growing up that kind of came back to her. So it connected on that level for sure, which is to your point in a way.
I think that's brilliant. So she wrote these short stories. What about, I mean, it's interesting, we don't usually get to talk up to the support channel for an author. What was that like when she was writing and stuff? Did she go take her laptop or whatever or write by hand? Like, how did you see it from your perspective, her writing?
Well, at one point she was longhand writing, but then she kind of switched over to the computer because I guess realized it was better. And she, you know, she went off on her own and did her thing. You know, she didn't really show it to me. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? But, you know, once something was completed, I would read these things. And I tell you, these short story parts are powerful. I mean, you'll see when you read it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And the book is, you know, it's not a happy book. There's a heavy theme about it, about this person's journey and how she's kind of seeking to make peace and have a redemption. But Annie had an incredible sense of humor. She had a wonderful way with words. She was able to kind of twist words that was so clever that the book is actually amusing. It is not a slog to read. It's not one of these, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know, it's kind of, it's a fast read. It's enjoyable because of, I think, the way the humor, it's Black Irish humor, is infused throughout the story.
Well, and it's funny you say Black Irish. So I discovered that was my lineage a few years ago from my dad. We apparently came over and told everybody we were Dutch, you know, like you do, because you used to be able to do that. You can't get away with that now coming into the country, but way back then you could come over and they go, what is your name?
Right.
Family apparently
you could say any name you wanted.
Yeah, no, they did.
O'Neill.
They said Kuiper, and that, which is a Dutch name. They told everybody they were Dutch. They were not Dutch. It was Fox, and they were absolutely Irish. You know, which we've lived in America for generations, but I think that's super neat. I was super excited when I saw what this book was about. I think it's phenomenal. Bo, you had questions. Bo comes prepared. I'm not good on the prepared factor.
I always write down my questions and Erica makes fun of me for it.
I do, because I have a Post-it that reminds me to ask for people to like and subscribe. That's the extremeness that I do with my podcasting.
Sure.
Okay, Bo, take it away, my friend.
So because you were talking about the reviews, I also looked at the reviews earlier today, and people repeated the same words over and over. They're like gritty, dark, humorous, grief. Why do you think Annie was so focused on grief in her story? What do you think she focused on?
Well, grief is what came out of the experience of her childhood. And I think what she she didn't want to live in grief. She wanted to be able to get past it. And it's really it's almost like an odyssey. It's a journey. The story is a journey from point A to point Z. And didn't want, like, she has a I changed my mind about what I was about to say. I didn't want to involve somebody else, but there's somebody else who's had a similar journey who does not want to look at it because it's too, whether it's painful or shameful or whatever the reason is, wants to keep that hidden. That's one way of dealing with that kind of experience. Annie was of a different cut of cloth. She felt that if you have this stuff inside of you, even if you're not aware of it on a conscious everyday basis, it's still in there, and it still somehow owns a piece of you on the inside. And if there's a darkness in there, or there's grief, or there's anger, or these emotions that we live every day, maybe not aware of it, it doesn't mean it's not impacting us, because it's there. And sometimes, I don't know, maybe you've all experienced this, but it's like, let's assume you had a bad experience with somebody sometime in your past, and you never really confronted it, and you just kind of made as if it was fine. And then 10 years later, you run into this person, or you see something that reminds you of it, and that anger can arise. Do you know what I'm talking about? That the emotion that was there from then, even though you weren't aware of it for 10 years, all of a sudden is enlivened. So the point is, just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean it's not eating at you. And that's not what Annie, she didn't want to live that way. So she felt, confront all these emotions, and let's see if we can move past it and come out the other side.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I think what's true, it's interesting, because I have talked to the therapist about this myself, is that there are things that can be in levels. And I think also becoming more aware of a situation changes how you then view something in the past if it comes up again. Because at that time, at that moment, you made a decision, whether it was to ignore it, to whatever, to say this was normal. There's a myriad of reactions that we have from a survivability to get past that. So whatever that moment is doesn't break us, right? And or break some part of us during it. And then, as you get older generally, and you experience different things, you suddenly have different glasses you're looking at that event from. So you can have something that may seem the most minute or mundane, and then it just hits this little hidden trigger on that box, that Pandora's box you were not aware of, and it goes click, and everything comes spewing out, and you're like, what?
Exactly. Yeah. I think we've all experienced that, I'm sure. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Okay, Bo, keep going on your epic question.
You mentioned that she wrote for journalistic publications. Did she write like biography stuff for them too, or what sort of articles did she write?
A lot of them were kind of biographical, I think. And she was a regular contributor to Huffington Post. And she often she would write sometimes about a trend item, but she would also write about certain individuals that she thought were exemplary in their field for some reason or another. So yes, there was a lot of that, especially at the Huff Post those years.
Very cool. Okay, one more, and then we're going to take a quick break. So my question for you is, what has anybody reached out besides reviews to you or on her social media or stuff like that about the book?
We're doing some events. We're having a bunch of book parties for her. We had one last Sunday. We've one this Sunday, the next Sunday, the next weekend after that. This afternoon, tomorrow morning, I'm doing an interview on Sirius Radio. Somebody reached out who has a program on Sirius to discuss it with me. I think a lot of people kind of when they realized, I think there was more interest in obviously speaking directly with the author. And some people kind of were interested in doing something. And then when they heard that Annie was not available, kind of backed away. But this evening, we're going up to have an in-store bookstore event. We're going to, and what I've done is I've been, at these events and parties, normally Annie would read a chapter from the book. So I've enlisted different actress friends of ours instead to come to these parties and read on her behalf. So tonight at there's a Flint Ridge bookstore up here in LA area, general area. And do you know if you know who Ray Dawn Chong is? Ray Dawn Chong, she starred in a bunch of movies years ago, and she's the daughter of Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong.
Yeah.
And she's great. So she's going to do a reading tonight. On Sunday, Susan Blakely. Do you remember Susan Blakely?
Yes. Yeah.
She's going to do the reading on Sunday. So, I have different people lined up for different events to do that. So there's been some outreach, but I think had Annie been available herself, for these conversations, I'm doing the best I can, but she would have been great because she's funny and smart and, would have been able to tell you more specifically where she's coming from. I'm just guessing at where she's coming from, knowing her as well as I do.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're doing a brilliant job. It really does.
Well,
Awesome.
Annie and I were very close. We had a great relationship. I miss her terribly, by the way. So I do know her pretty well. And so I think what I'm telling you is not far from the truth, for sure.
I am absolutely sure. And
Okay.
I think that's wonderful. Okay, we have to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
And we're back. So I love that she has all these author friends that you have enlisted to come read her books. That gives it a whole level of special. And although it's not for the right reasons at all, what I think is neat about that is that's a whole promotional thing in and of itself for this book, which is wonderful because you are working to create the audience for her book and to get it out there. Because some people put out books and they just sit and not even on shelves. They just sit in some nebulous electronic void somewhere that, their cousins bought a couple books, but that's it, So
well, I'm trying to honor her legacy, frankly, and burnish her legacy. She really put her heart and soul into this book. And tragically, as we mentioned earlier, she passed before it was actually published. And so I, as her husband and her best pal, I want to do whatever I can to get people to appreciate, because it happens to be a wonderful book. It's getting wonderful reviews. It is a wonderful read. I think when you finally get the book, you girls are going to love it, honestly.
And you'll get amazing reviews from us because we are those people that will give amazing reviews. So did you get to read the whole thing before she actually sent it to the publisher? Did she let you do that, or did she make you wait?
It's an interesting question. The truth of the matter is, she kind of kept me a little at arm's length throughout the whole process. I don't think she wanted my influence on it at all. She wanted this to be her book. And I think she was concerned, honestly, that I might read it and say this and that, and and she didn't want to hear from me because I think I do influence her a lot on certain things. And as far as the book, she wanted me not to have anything to say. I read a version of it about 3 years ago, and then I didn't read the new version until it was already about to be published.
Oh, wow. And what did you think when you read it?
I thought to myself, she's a damn good writer. She has her own voice. It's really clear. I don't think when you read the book that you would confuse her writer's voice with any other writers out there. Her style is almost conversational, and she writes the way she spoke, and she was funny and clever. And so I thought to myself, she's actually an excellent writer. I thought the book was a fast read. I was very proud of her, actually. I thought she did a damn good job. And I know she really worked for years to improve her skills. She studied, she used to go to writing groups, and she held and conducted a writing group, and she really made an effort to kind of make her, hone her skills. So when I finally read it, I thought to myself, damn good, Annie. You did good.
I think that's awesome. Go ahead.
Are there any scenes in the book that you read and that brought you comfort?
Good question. I think that essentially, by the end of the book, there is a triumph in the character. And it's interesting, even just getting the book published was a triumph. And I would say to her, she was concerned about what she accomplished. I say, listen, the fact that a credible publisher who's been around for like decades, this is not a new fly-by-night, they've been around, I think, for 50 years almost, who have their choice of dozens of options, chose to publish your book, means that it's worthy. And I think the way the character evolved through all her fits and starts, and going this path and trying that path, and everything should happen, whether it was with, sex and drugs and all these other experiences that she went through until she kind of found her way. So by the fact that at the end there was a certain level of peace, made me feel good, because it made me think that in Annie's real life, hopefully inside, she felt that peace as well.
I think that's true. And it's interesting to hear. So we kind of call that in writing imposter syndrome, when authors who have great voices and great stories to tell get worried that they're not great and that people aren't going to like them. And since writing can be, even though you should have a community always, but majority of writing one does by oneself. And so you can really easily get into your head and start second guessing everything that you're doing, because you're by yourself and nobody else is there going, stop it. What are you doing? You're amazing. And it's interesting, the validations, and how sometimes the validations have to be told back to us that we are where we think we are, or we're better than in that moment we think we are.
Right. Right. Well, that's why I wish she was able to live long enough to get some of these reviews, even something simple. I'll tell you, Alice McDermott, Annie approached Alice back in, I think, April, and she found her personal email through Annie's different methods of getting information. And she wrote to Alice and she reintroduced herself. And Alice said she absolutely remembered Annie because they had the shared Irish heritage. And she remembered Annie from the class. And she said, I would love to read your novel. And Annie said, if you like it, if you would give us a quote, we'd, be great if you like it. And Alice said she would read it, but she had to warn Annie that she had a queue of books she had to read first before she got to it. So bottom line, by the time they got ready to print the cover of the book, and we still hadn't heard from Alice, and Annie was so disappointed that she hadn't heard back from Alice, and she reached out to her again, hadn't heard back. And then after she passed, and they were finishing up the book cover for printing, I looked through Annie's computer and I found Alice's email address. So I decided to write to her. And I wrote to her, introducing myself, tell her the circumstance, reminding her about the book. She wrote back immediately. She said, coincidentally, she had just finished reading it a few days before, and she called it a wonderful novel. And she said, I finished Andy's wonderful novel, and I'll be happy to give you a quote, which she did, and which is on the back. Now, the publishers were so excited to get a quote from Alice McDermott because she's important enough to move the needle. But
Yes.
Alice wrote back and gave the quote. I remember feeling such a pain in my heart in a way, because that quote from Alice, who Annie held in such high esteem, would have meant the world to her. And when I saw that she wrote back and she said what she said, again, it was like what I said before. It was a mixture of joy and pain about the whole thing. But that's how life. It was a cruel twist of fate that Annie. She tripped and fell, and that's what started her demise.
Oh, okay. I hadn't asked that question.
She tripped on a cobblestone up in Carmel, and she fractured her hip, which resulted in some internal bleeding, which eventually shut down her organs, and that was the end. So it was a cruel twist of fate that happened. Otherwise, she would have still been around and been able to, get the accolades that are coming through. So it's, it's bittersweet.
I can totally understand that, but I love that you are doing what she would want done with it instead of just being upset and putting it away. She would want this out there, and I have no doubt, wherever she is in the universe now, I'm sure appreciates it wholeheartedly,
right,
that you're doing this for her. And I think it's amazing.
I hope there is something to the fact that there is some sort of consciousness in the afterlife, and that she does, in fact, who knows? If she knew, this would be great.
Yeah, no, I'm sure she can feel it. That's how I think. We lose people, but their memories keep everything alive for us and make a difference and stuff like that. So I lost my mom when I was 27, and when I first published a book, because she'd actually written a children's book, which I'm going to publish next year for her. And I know she would have loved it. She would have loved seeing that her, I write horror stories that don't have happy endings. So she might have been like, can you write something with a happy ending? But but she would have loved it. And so I think, she's down there smiling, going, well done, Erica. And can you write something with a happy ending? That's what I hear in the back of my head. You write something with a happy ending. So that's very cool. Bo, did you have more questions on your epic list of questions?
I do. What is one thing you want people to know about Annie before they pick up the book?
Well, truthfully, Annie was about kindness, and being kindness in the world, which is clearly lacking these days more than ever. But I think that's really what her mission. She had a boatload of friends. At the memorial, I did a eulogy, and what I said, which was totally true, is when Annie passed, our family literally received probably between 250 and 300 messages of condolence and sympathy. And I was thinking to myself, what was it about Annie that she connected to so many people, that really she touched people? And what it was is that she had basic respect for other people. When she would meet somebody, she would actually look them in the eye and say, how are you? And it wasn't a game. She was present with people. And if she didn't know them, she might admire their glasses or a piece of jewelry they were wearing. If she knew them, she might ask about their family or a trip they had recently taken. But the point is, she was present and respectful, and was with people, and she touched people. People wanted, I think what people really want, and she knew this, was to be seen. People want to be acknowledged. They want to matter in the world. And people don't want to go through the world feeling anonymous, unseen, disrespected, unimportant. And what Annie used to do is she would make people feel important. And she
That's
would make
awesome.
people feel seen. And the result is, it doesn't matter if it was a service person like a plumber or a housekeeper, or it was somebody held in high esteem like the head surgeon at the hospital or a college professor. She treated everybody equally, and people felt it from her. And that's why I think there was such an outpouring of love and grief from people when they heard that she had passed.
I think that's awesome. And I think what you said is very, very true, is that, we sometimes walk through life and we have whatever our own mission, our own insecurities and whatever. But even just acknowledging somebody's existence, like when you go to drive-through Starbucks or whatever, right? Every time they go, hey, how can I help you? Blah, blah, blah. I go, hey, I hope you're having a great day. I would like blah, because
Right.
That's not a machine. That's a human on the other side of
That's right.
that I'm sure is put up with some not pleasant customers or
Sure.
will. It needs to have that acknowledgement that you're assisting them and thanking them for doing what they're doing. Or just, when you see an artist at a craft fair and stuff like that, walking up and going, this is really beautiful. Now, of course, they want you to buy something. So you might be hesitant to not go, oh, they're going to think I want to buy something, but just acknowledge them. Even if you don't want to purchase something or it's not your thing, just, they're sitting there with some piece of them on that table, and you just have to go, hey, I like this. It doesn't mean it's your thing. It just means that you can acknowledge what they're doing.
So I find that also, even with homeless on the street who are asking for money you're in your car. Now, most of the time, sometimes I'll give money depending on how I'm feeling, but generally I don't. But yet, when I noticed, this was yesterday, somebody I was parked at a red light, and this guy held up a sign, and I looked at him, and I kind of said hello, and he waved back, and that was the end of the exchange. I didn't give him anything, and he didn't really push for anything. I know that's what he was there for, but I think a lot of these people don't even look at them. And I think just to kind of acknowledge that they're there. Listen, I feel sorry for the circumstance for all these people, but it's they are humans, and anybody who's standing at the side of the road begging for money has got to be in a bad way. That's your life. Whatever the reason for it, it's got to be, so it's a little kindness.
It's true. It's true. Okay. Bo, anything else on your epic list? Because
go Bo.
Well, between the questions you've asked and the questions I've asked, we've gotten all of my questions.
All of the questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a final question is, I know Annie probably would have loved to have done the audiobook for this book, but circumstances, that's not going to happen. Do you have somebody in mind, or has somebody volunteered to do the audiobook for her?
I do have people in mind, actually. One of her friends who's an actress, Holly Palance, has done audiobooks, and she'd be great. I know I spoke to the publisher about this a few weeks ago, and I think he sent it to some pretty well-known actress to see if they might be able to do it. So I'm not sure where it stands. I haven't discussed it with them in a while, but I'm absolutely going to, after we hang up, I'm going to get a hold of them and find out where's the audiobook, where's the ebook, where's the paperback. Let's get moving, guys.
You're going to be like, listen, don't make me call Erica back, because she'll get
exactly. Erica's going to be pissed off.
We're chomping at the bit for that book, because we were both talking about it. I was like, this book looks great, and Erica's like, I know, where is the ebook? We really want to listen to it, or like read it. And
all right,
I really can't wait to read it. I'm really excited.
I'm saying, I think you're really going to like it.
We can't wait. Get that publisher moving on stuff.
Be like, believe me, I'm not
right. Authors has demanded it. Okay, Jeffrey, I would love for you to do a little, I call it shameless self-promotion, but I'd love for you to tell people where they can find out more about Annie and where they can find her book.
Yes. First of all, her book is available on Amazon. and other places. It's distributed by Ingram. So wherever Ingram sells, I think it's available, but it's definitely on Amazon. It's also available from the publisher, which is thepermanentpress.com. Thepermanentpress.com. You can get it from them as well. Her website is annieo'neillstein.com. There seems to be at the moment some issue with the platform. So I have to sort that out, because I went to check it out yesterday and it's not up for some reason. But that will I'll have to figure that one out. But that's annieo'neillstein.com. And buy the book, buy it for a friend, give it for Christmas present, tell people about it, spread the word. It's definitely worthy.
Absolutely. And the book is called Exit Wounds. We got to throw that in there so people.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You know what? You would be surprised the amount of authors who start talking about their stuff. And I'm like, and the title of the book is, they're just saying everything else. Exit Wounds. So
Yes.
We are absolutely looking forward to it. It
Good.
sounds brilliant. Jeffrey, I want to thank you so much for coming on this special episode with us and sharing your wife's work. I think it's amazing. And we love that we can continue to carry her voice forward. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your giving us the time.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. Our sponsor today is Skunk Brothers Spirits, coupon code DWA10. Check them out. Don't forget to review, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. My amazing co-host has been Bo Lake, and we will see you guys next time.